to see the teddy bears are here to play. If you don't come play with us, then we will kill you.
Everyone knows that 2020 wasn't the greatest year, considering everything that happened. But nothing that happened that year compares to the incident of 2021. Now, the beginning of 2021 didn't seem as bad, considering everything. However, during the end of the year, a new vaccine for the coronavirus was released, along with a bill saying that everyone was required to take said vaccine, or risk jail time and banishment from all public places. To this day, I have no idea how they managed that, and there probably would have been a riot about it if it weren't for the rumor that went around saying it didn't even work, and there were no side effects at all. This somehow put all the Karens of the world at ease enough to take it. I wish for once they hadn't. While it was true the vaccine didn't have any effects on anyone living, it was another story for the dead. All those who took the vaccine when living would eventually come back from the dead, roaming the earth in a futile attempt to quench a never-ending hunger. By the new year in 2022, practically 80% of the human population was either killed or turned into one of those awful hungry beasts. It didn't take long for the world to become overrun and chaotic. Buildings became rotten, large skyscrapers crumbled and fell, cities were overgrown as the earth slowly took itself back. There were times I thought I was the only human left. I'd find fallen societies and messages left behind from the dead. The whole earth constantly smelled of death. Dead bodies littered the ground everywhere I went, both the gone and the walking kind. I tried living in the mountains for a while, the one few places left that didn't contain any dead. But since I'm not one for gardening, even under the circumstances, going down into town was a necessity for gathering supplies. Soon that became a problem. With the town slowly becoming overrun, the shortage of supplies, and the trek from the mountain to the city becoming harder and harder, I eventually decided to leave my shelter and begin exploring. I'd sleep in cars or up in trees. Sometimes I'd even spend a night or two in one of the abandoned camps I'd find. But there was never any evidence of anyone living, only those who had passed. At times I wondered what the point was to keep living. If I really was the last human alive, what was the point? I never answered that question. I just stopped thinking about it. Eventually I made it to a town that looked like it had been fortified at one point. The whole town was protected by a large metal fence that was double guarded with wooden fencing on both sides. It looked sturdy, safe, protected. But when I found a way in, the place was deserted, empty. Like everyone inside just got up and left. The stench of death plagued the town, and I knew something bad had happened here. Even the strongest, most fortified havens would fall eventually. The only question I had was, where were all the dead? I cautiously made my way around the town, listening carefully for any moaning or shuffling of feet. All the buildings were empty. I couldn't even find any supplies in any of them. At the back of the town was a building not like the rest. It appeared to have been some sort of warehouse or storage facility at some point. All the windows and doors were boarded and chained shut, and there was a large fence surrounding it. In hindsight, it probably would have been better had I kept moving, but you know what they say about the curious cat. I found a way around the fence and attempted to find a way into the building. There had to be supplies or weapons or something inside for it to be so protected. Or maybe even survivors were hunkered down inside. I was about to give up finding a way in when I noticed a window at the very top. It was small and high, but I had spent months trekking the mountains. How hard could climbing a building be? Not hard, apparently, because it only took me a total of 10 minutes to plan a scaling process and to actually climb up there. The window was indeed small, but once I took my backpack off, I was able to squeeze through. The window led to a small attic, where I paused for a moment to listen for any unusual sounds. Nothing. Dead silent. Pun not intended. Luckily, the door was unlocked, and I was able to carefully make my way down to the next level. It was another attic-like place, filled with crates and boxes. It was mostly old junk that I couldn't use or didn't need, but there was also a lot of medical supplies, which was extremely useful to have. It wasn't until I got to the fourth and final level that I realized something was definitely wrong. The unmistakable stench of death hung heavily in the air. I explored the basement cautiously, listening for any signs of the dead. When I turned a corner, I finally saw them. A whole room full of them. Rancid, decaying bodies, standing and moaning as if they were still alive. There appeared to be hundreds of them. Perhaps these were the people that once populated the town. What happened to them? Why were they here? Were they hiding from something and got trapped? There wasn't time to investigate. They luckily hadn't noticed me yet, but I knew they would soon. I tiptoed back down the hall, keeping an eye on my back to make sure I wasn't going to be spotted. As I turned the corner, one of the foul beasts appeared before me. I screamed in shock and quickly covered my mouth. There was a brief moment of silence. It was just a second, but it felt like hours. Nothing made a sound, and I just stood there as I slowly realized what I had done. I dashed past the zombie before me as the horde behind me began chasing down the hall. The hall soon became a maze, and the doors all appeared to look the same. I was starting to panic, losing my way in the mess. The good thing was the dead were slow, but so are humans when they panic. I rounded a corner and ran through the first door I saw, slamming it and locking it behind me. Pressing my body weight against it, I listened as the horde approached closer and closer. I prayed they would just walk past, that they'd forget I was there, but they had locked into my scent. They knew where I was, and they were so hungry. I jumped away from the door as they began banging on it, and I slowly backed into the room. My back hit the wall as the door shook and vibrated with effort. I was cornered, trapped. There was no way out. If I truly was the last human on the planet, then humanity was about to go extinct. They pounded once, twice, 3 times, and the door was off its hinges. I didn't even bother going for a weapon. There were too many of them, moving too fast. They surrounded me within seconds, ripping and biting at my flesh. Their claw-like nails dug into my skin, tearing the muscle and fat apart. I wanted to scream, but my throat was shredded before I could. Blood poured into my lungs and mouth as I was eaten alive. I watched my bones break and my limbs be torn from my body. But no matter how painful or terrifying this was, the worst part was knowing that this wasn't the end. And that's how I got here, walking in a stupid horde with equally stupid monsters. I still had all my memories. I knew what I was, but I couldn't think about any of it. I couldn't feel the love for my friends or family. I couldn't feel the happiness of life's greatest moments. I couldn't even feel the sadness of life's worst moments. All I could feel was hunger, a torturous, never-ending hunger that I could never seem to fulfill. It was the worst pain, worst longing I had ever felt. I craved anything that was living, breathing. You can find living things easily. Their distinct smell of blood and life. It's easy to tell the difference between death and life. But it didn't mean it was easy to catch. My clumsy body and troubled mind made it hard to hunt, even in a pack like this. I hadn't eaten in weeks, and I knew my body would soon finally shut down and rest. I could just let that happen, but the hunger kept me moving. I didn't want to die hungry. We finally came across a large fence, guarded by old stacked cars and men with guns. I could smell their sweet flesh and savory blood from here, even amongst all the dead. I knew there were more too, beyond that fence. There was a whole feast. My mouth salivated at the thought. It was well protected, and I knew many of us would die. But if there's one thing I learned from the apocalypse, it's that societies always fall.